Captain Jenna Roth stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the massive draconian dreadnought approach through the viewport. The alien ship was a marvel of aggressive design, with jagged edges and weapon ports that seemed to snarl at anyone who dared look upon it. She adjusted her crisp blue uniform and took a deep breath, preparing for another round of what the Draconians called negotiations, but what felt more like ritualized humiliation. "They're hailing us again," reported Lieutenant Tom Beck from the communication station. The young officer's voice carried a hint of frustration that Jenna understood all too well. This was his first diplomatic mission, and the Draconians had been particularly cruel in their mockery today. "Put them through, Lieutenant," Jenna replied calmly, her voice betraying none of the anger she felt brewing beneath the surface. Main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of General Corvin Thule. His reptilian features were twisted into what passed for a smile among his species, but his yellow eyes held nothing but contempt. Behind him, other Draconian officers could be seen laughing and pointing at the human ship. "Ah, Captain Roth," General Thule hissed, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. "Have you come to surrender another border system to us today? Or perhaps you wish to discuss the weather like children?" The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Jenna felt Tom's eyes on her, waiting to see how she would respond to the insult. She had been doing this dance for 3 years now, ever since humanity had made first contact with the Draconian hegemony. "General Thule," she replied with practiced diplomacy, "we're here to discuss the mining rights in the Kepler system, as agreed upon in our previous meeting." The Draconian's laughter was like the sound of grinding metal. "Mining rights? You humans are so amusing. You speak of rights as if you have any power to enforce them." He leaned forward, his scales catching the harsh light of his ship's bridge. "Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. We have conquered worlds when your ancestors were still cowering in caves." From the corner of her eye, Jenna saw Tom's hand clench into a fist. She gave him a subtle shake of her head. The young man had no idea how much restraint it took to maintain this facade of weakness. None of them did. "Nevertheless," Jenna continued, "the Galactic Council has recognized both our claims. Surely we can reach an agreement that benefits both our peoples." General Thule's expression grew even more contemptuous. "The Galactic Council," he spat. "A collection of weak-willed species who hide behind words instead of showing strength, just like you humans." He gestured dismissively at the screen. "Look at your ship, Captain. No weapons visible, no aggressive posturing. You float through space like a leaf on the wind, hoping that good intentions will protect you." The accusation stung because they weren't entirely false. The Harmony was indeed a diplomatic vessel, designed for comfort and negotiation rather than combat. Its sleek white hull bore the symbols of peace from a dozen different human cultures. To the Draconians, it must have looked like the ultimate symbol of human naivety. "We believe in the power of dialogue," Jenna said, maintaining her composure even as General Thule's officers continued their mockery in the background. "Dialogue," the general repeated, his voice thick with disdain. "Tell me, Captain, what will you do when dialogue fails, when words are not enough to protect your precious colonies?" It was a threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. The Draconians had been making similar comments for months now, testing humanity's resolve. Each time, the human response had been the same: more diplomatic overtures, more attempts at peaceful resolution. "We hope it never comes to that," Jenna replied truthfully. "Hope?" General Thule laughed again. "Hope is what the weak cling to when they have no strength. Your species has impressed me with its capacity for hope, Captain. You hope for peace while we prepare for war. You hope for understanding while we sharpen our claws." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Tom was the first to speak, his young voice tight with anger. "Captain, how long are we going to let them treat us like this? They're mocking everything we stand for." Jenna turned to look at him, seeing her own frustration reflected in his eyes. "As long as it takes, Lieutenant. Our mission is to keep the peace." "But they're not peaceful," Tom protested. Intelligence reports show they've been moving fleets toward our border systems. They're planning something. He was right, of course. Ambassador David Cross had sent encrypted messages detailing draconian military buildups along the neutral zone. The Empire was clearly preparing for some kind of action, using the diplomatic talks as a smokescreen. I know, Jenna said quietly. But our orders are clear. We continue negotiations until all diplomatic options are exhausted. What she didn't tell Tom, what she couldn't tell him, was that those orders came from much higher up the chain of command. Earth's leadership had made a decision long ago about how to handle the draconian situation. The young lieutenant assumed that humanity's peaceful approach was born from weakness or naivety. He had no idea about the true nature of the choice being made. 3 days later, they received word that another human colony ship had gone missing in draconian space. The official response from the Empire was that the vessel had suffered a navigation error and wandered into a restricted military zone. The debris field told a different story. Ambassador Cross arrived on the Harmony within hours, his weathered face grim with the weight of bad news. David had been humanity's chief negotiator with the Draconians since first contact, and Jenna had never seen him look so tired. They're not even bothering to hide it anymore, he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. The debris from the colony ship shows clear evidence of weapons fire, draconian energy signatures. How many? Jenna asked, though she dreaded the answer. 3,000 civilians, David replied heavily. Families, children, elderly folks looking for a new start on the frontier worlds. He rubbed his temples, the gesture making him look older than his 60 years. The Draconians are calling it an unfortunate accident and offering compensation. Jenna felt something cold settle in her stomach. 3,000 people, gone because they had wandered into the wrong part of space at the wrong time, or perhaps because they hadn't wandered at all. Perhaps they had been exactly where they were supposed to be. What are our orders? She asked. David's smile was bitter. The same as always, keep talking, keep hoping, keep believing that the Draconians will eventually see reason. But even as he spoke the words, Jenna could see that David no longer believed them himself. Something had changed in the ambassador's eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before. That night, alone in her quarters, Jenna accessed her personal terminal and typed a message she had never thought she would send. The encryption was so deep that only 3 people in the entire human government would be able to read it. The message was simple: diplomatic solutions have been exhausted. Requesting authorization for Protocol 7. She hesitated for a long moment before hitting send. Protocol 7 was something that had been discussed only in the most classified briefings, a contingency plan that most humans didn't even know existed. It represented everything that humanity had tried to avoid since joining the galactic community. But the Draconians had made their choice. They had seen human patience as weakness, human kindness as stupidity. They had pushed and pushed, testing the boundaries of human tolerance, never realizing that they were approaching a line that should never be crossed. As Jenna finally sent the message, she wondered if the Draconians would ever understand their mistake. Probably not, she thought. By the time they realized their error, it would be far too late. The response came back within 6 hours, coded with the highest level of security clearance. 2 words that would change everything. Authorization granted. Captain Jenna Roth looked out at the stars one last time as a diplomat. Tomorrow she would have a very different role to play. The transformation began in silence. Captain Jenna Roth stood in the command center of what had once been the diplomatic vessel Harmony. The pristine white walls now displayed tactical readouts and weapon system diagnostics. The ship's peaceful exterior remained unchanged, but beneath its hull, systems that had been dormant for years were coming online. All stations report ready, Captain, announced Commander Eric Voss, who had arrived 12 hours earlier with a team of specialists that Tom Beck didn't recognize. The young lieutenant watched in amazement as the bridge crew he had known for months revealed expertise in systems he had never seen before. Dr. Ward, status on the primary weapon systems? Jenna asked. her voice carrying an authority that Tom had never heard before. "Quantum disruptors are at full charge," replied Dr. Helena Ward, a woman who had introduced herself as a cultural attaché, but was now clearly something else entirely. "Kinetic bombardment satellites have achieved optimal positioning. We have clear firing solutions on all Draconian fleet positions." Tom's head was spinning. 12 hours ago, he had been serving on a peaceful diplomatic mission. Now he was apparently on a warship that could level cities. "Captain," he said hesitantly, "I don't understand what's happening." Jenna turned to him, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked at him with something approaching sympathy. "Lieutenant Beck, what you're seeing is what humanity has always been capable of. We just chose not to show it." Before Tom could respond, the communications array crackled to life. General Corvin Thule's sneering face appeared on the main screen, but his expression was different now. Confused. Concerned. "Captain Roth," the Draconian began, his usual mockery replaced by uncertainty. "Our sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures from human vessels throughout the sector. What are you doing?" "What we should have done a long time ago," Jenna replied calmly. The general's yellow eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening us, human? Your pathetic ships are no match for the might of the Draconian Empire." "General Thule," Jenna said, her voice taking on a tone that made the bridge crew straighten unconsciously. "You have exactly one opportunity to withdraw all Draconian forces from human space and return to your own territory. This offer expires in 60 seconds. The general's laughter was harsh and disbelieving. "You dare give ultimatums to us? We have conquered 100 worlds while your species was learning to make fire. Your diplomacy has failed, and now you resort to empty threats?" 50 seconds, Jenna said quietly. "Your fleet consists of research vessels and pleasure craft," General Thule snarled. "We have dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, weapons that can crack planets. What could you possibly do to threaten us?" 40 seconds. The general's expression began to change as he realized that Jenna wasn't bluffing. Behind him, other Draconian officers were frantically checking their instruments, their voices rising in alarm. "Sir," one of them called out, "we're detecting massive energy buildups from the human vessels. These readings don't match anything in our database." 30 seconds, Jenna continued, her eyes never leaving the general's face. "This is impossible," General Thule hissed. "Your species doesn't have the stomach for war. You're pacifists, cowards, who hide behind words." 20 seconds. Tom watched in fascination as panic began to spread through the Draconian bridge. Their instruments were clearly telling them something that their minds couldn't accept. The humans they had mocked and dismissed were revealing capabilities that shouldn't exist. 15 seconds. "Wait," General Thule said, his voice losing its confident edge. "Perhaps we can discuss this further. There's no need for hasty actions." 10 seconds, Jenna replied implacably. "I said, wait," the general shouted, his composure finally cracking. "You can't do this. The Galactic Council will never approve." 5 seconds. "Stop. I order you to stop." "Time's up," Jenna said softly and nodded to Dr. Ward. The universe seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then across the sector, dormant human vessels began to reveal their true nature. What had appeared to be merchant ships suddenly bristled with weapon ports. Scientific research stations transformed into fortress platforms. And from the depths of space, where no human presence had been detected, massive dreadnoughts began to decloak. General Thule's screen erupted in chaos as his flagship was struck by weapons that his shields couldn't even register. The Draconian vessel, pride of their fleet, was disabled in seconds. Not destroyed, disabled. The difference was important. "Impossible," the general whispered, staring at his dead controls. "You made a fundamental error, General," Jenna said, her voice carrying across the now silent communications channel. "You assumed that because we chose peace we were incapable of war. You mistook patience for weakness, restraint for cowardice." Across the sector, the Draconian fleet was being systematically neutralized. Not a single human ship had been lost. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over in minutes. Admiral Patricia Stone's voice came over the tactical channel, calm and professional. All Draconian vessels have been disabled or have surrendered. No human casualties reported. Total enemy casualties. Minimal. Tom stared at the tactical display in wonder. The Draconian fleet that had terrorized this sector for months had been eliminated without the loss of a single human life. The precision was incredible, the technology overwhelming. "Captain," he said quietly, "how is this possible? How long have we had these capabilities?" Jenna turned from her console, and Tom saw something in her eyes that he was only beginning to understand. "Lieutenant, humanity has possessed these capabilities for over 2 centuries. We've simply chosen not to use them." "But why?" Tom asked. "If we had this power all along, why did we let them mock us? Why did we let them kill our people?" It was Dr. Ward who answered, her voice heavy with the weight of history. "Because we remember what we were like before we learned restraint, Lieutenant. Humanity didn't develop these weapons to conquer others. We developed them to survive our own nature." On the main screen, General Thule was slowly regaining his composure, though his ship remained powerless. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice lacking all of its former arrogance. "Nothing," Jenna replied. "We want you to go home. We want you to leave human space and never return, and we want you to remember what happened here today." "Remember what?" the general asked. "That humanity chooses peace not because we must, but because we can afford to. That our restraint is not weakness, but wisdom. And that there are consequences for those who mistake one for the other." Commander Voss stepped forward. "General, your fleet is being escorted to the edge of human space. Your vessels will be returned to full functionality once you cross the border. Any Draconian ship that returns to human space will be destroyed without warning." The general's pride made one last attempt to assert itself. "The Empire will not forget this humiliation. There will be consequences." Jenna's smile was cold. "General, please understand something very clearly. What happened today was not a war. It was a demonstration. If you want to see what human warfare actually looks like, you're welcome to test us again." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Tom looked around at his crewmates, seeing them in an entirely new light. These people he had served with, laughed with, shared meals with. They were all part of something much larger and more powerful than he had ever imagined. "Sir," Tom said finally, "what happens now?" Jenna began entering commands into her console, and gradually the warship systems began to power down. The tactical displays faded, replaced once again by the peaceful interfaces of a diplomatic vessel. "Now, Lieutenant, we go back to being diplomats. We'll file our reports, attend our meetings, and continue working for peace throughout the galaxy." "But everyone will know," Tom protested. "The Draconians will tell everyone what happened here." Dr. Ward chuckled softly. "And who do you think will believe them? A proud warrior race claiming they were defeated by pacifist humans? Most species will assume they're covering up a military disaster or internal rebellion." As if to prove her point, Ambassador Cross's voice came over the communication system. "Captain Roth, I've just received word from the Galactic Council. The Draconians are claiming that they suffered massive system failures during routine military exercises. They're requesting emergency aid to repair their fleet." Jenna's smile was knowing. "And our response, Ambassador?" "The same as always, Captain. Humanity stands ready to provide humanitarian assistance to any species in need. We're dispatching medical ships and repair crews immediately." Tom shook his head in amazement. Even in defeat, the Draconians were too proud to admit they had been outmaneuvered by the species they had considered weak. Over the following weeks, as the Harmony returned to its normal diplomatic duties, Tom began to understand the true scope of what he had witnessed. Humanity's reputation as peaceful negotiators remained intact. The Draconian Empire quietly withdrew from human space, citing strategic realignment as their reason. And throughout the galaxy, the balance of power remained stable, with most species never knowing how close they had come to witnessing something unprecedented. But Tom knew. He carried the knowledge of humanity's hidden strength, understanding now that his species' greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics, but their wisdom. They had learned to choose their battles, to value peace above conquest, and to use their power only when absolutely necessary. The young lieutenant often thought about General Thule's final words, about consequences and remembrance. The Draconian had been right about one thing. There would be consequences, but they would not be the ones he expected. Word spread quietly through certain channels in the galaxy. Species that had considered humanity weak began to reconsider. Aggressive empires that had planned expansion into human space found other directions for their ambitions. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, the region of space around human worlds became more peaceful. Captain Jenna Roth continued her diplomatic missions, her manner as calm and patient as ever. But those who knew her secret understood that her patience was not born from weakness. It was the patience of someone who could end conflicts with a word, but chose instead to prevent them with wisdom. And in the deepest vaults of Earth's military installations, the weapons that had ended the draconian threat in minutes returned to their silent vigil, waiting for the day they might be needed again. Waiting, but hoping that day would never come. For humanity had learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary, and the courage to choose mercy when it is not. The universe was a little safer because of that wisdom, and Tom Beck, now understanding his place in something much larger than himself, was proud to be human.